Hi everyone. In this lesson, I'm going to offer some tips and examples of how you can expand your expository essay using the modes of explanation. In the past, I've heard students say that English teachers always want you to add fluff to your essay. I can say with certainty that no English teacher is a fan of fluff or wordy writing. What we want are vivid examples and explanations to further prove a point. Therefore, you should never ramble on just to meet a length requirement, and the modes of explanation can help you expand your essay in a meaningful way so you don't have to resort to rambling or fluff or filler. The first mode of explanation is defining. Many students miss a great opportunity to purposefully expand their essays when they define key terms, phrases, or concepts. All of these things are contestable. Words and definitions are contestable. So that's why it's important to define your terms. Be aware that the same word might mean different things to different people. Again, this is why it is so important to define your terms. Showing is the mode of explanation that's used most frequently in narrative and expository essays. When you offer readers a showing description, you're telling them about the sights, the sounds, the smells, the actions, the feelings, all of that stuff that occurred during a specific moment in time. So showing is really the specific sensory details or any other emotional details that you are going to reveal to the reader. Another mode of explanation is classifying. This mode breaks something into smaller parts for the purpose of clarifying or understanding. Classifying is often used when people want to fully explain different types or variations within a group. Comparing and contrasting is another mode of explanation that can help you meaningfully expand your essay. When you compare and contrast two things, you address both their similarities and their differences, both of which will give your readers a deeper understanding of your subject. Causing is the mode of explanation that relies on cause and effect. In other words, you might explain how certain circumstances caused events or how an outcome came to be. Causal explanations can move backward or forward through time, from cause to effect or from effect to cause. So hopefully you were taking notes as I explained all of the different modes of explanation. So for the remainder of the lesson, I'm going to offer you some concrete examples of the modes of explanation as they've appeared in essays written by former students. I'll be asking you to identify each mode of explanation that's being used. Keep in mind that in your own writing, you may blend several different modes of explanation within a single body paragraph. However, in these examples, I'll be asking you to identify the most salient or prominent mode of explanation that's being used. Okay, so just to remind you, defining, showing, classifying, comparing, and causing are the main modes of explanation that we've addressed in this lesson. So as I read this paragraph, I want you to think about the primary mode of explanation that's being used. In the ideal classroom, respect is given to the students. When the teacher respects students enough to ask for their opinions and feedback, the students will, in turn, end up respecting the teacher and listening to his or her message, which will create a happy environment where students want to learn. So think about the mode of explanation, pause the presentation if you need a little more time to think, and identify which mode of explanation you think is primarily being used in this body paragraph. So now that you've had some time to think, the mode of explanation that's being used here is causing. So there's a cause and effect relationship. The teacher respecting the students is causing the students to respect the teacher. So that's clearly a causal mode of explanation in that paragraph, or in that excerpt rather. Okay, so here's another excerpt that I want you to think about the primary mode of explanation that's being used here. The classroom is clean and there's plenty of sunlight filtering through the green leaves of dancing trees as they cast interesting patterns on the clean carpet. The classroom smells like coffee, which the students sip while sitting at desks in close proximity to each other, shoulder to shoulder in a perfect semicircle, nodding their heads vigorously as a classmate makes a point. So take a moment, pause the presentation if you need more time to think, and consider what mode of explanation is primarily being used in this excerpt. The primary mode here is showing. You'll notice that there are many sensory details. So there's the visual details of the sunlight, there's the sensory detail, the smell of the coffee, there's the visual detail of how the students are sitting. So this is very much a sensory description. So this is an example of showing as a mode of explanation. And because you're writing an expository essay, you will rely a lot on showing examples. Okay, so here's a different excerpt. Another mode of explanation is being used here, and I want you to think about what that might possibly be. One criterion that distinguishes one classroom from another is atmosphere. Some people consider the atmosphere of a learning environment to be dependent upon the actual classroom space, but for me, the atmosphere is defined by the people inside the classroom, especially the students. If people in the class care about their education and are trying hard, the classroom atmosphere will be positive. So again, the modes of explanation are defining, showing, classifying, comparing, and causing. Pause the slide if you need more time to think and consider what the primary mode of explanation is in this excerpt. So you might have noticed within the paragraph there's a key word, defining. This mode of explanation is utilized because the student is clarifying what she means by the atmosphere. So some people may take atmosphere to mean something different. So the student took the time to explain that. So that's a really good example of defining as a mode of explanation in action. This excerpt relies on a different mode of explanation, one that we haven't used yet. So I'll read the excerpt to you and I want you to consider what mode of explanation is being used. In education, there seems to be two types of teachers, those that care and those that do not. Obviously, the teacher that cares about his students will have more of a positive impact on the learning environment than the one that does not. Within the category of those that care, however, there seems to be another two subcategories, those that talk and those that listen. My ideal learning environment is headed by a teacher who listens just as much as he talks. Okay, so pause the slide if you need more time to think and consider what mode of explanation is being used in this excerpt. So the mode of explanation primarily that's used here is classifying because the student is breaking down the different types of teachers. So obviously not all teachers are the same. There's different types of teachers, and the student even goes so far as to break it down into subcategories. So again, classifying is a great way that you can expand your essay without resorting to filler. Okay, so last example, again, same thing, identify the primary mode of explanation that's being used in this excerpt, and I'll read it for you. In my ideal class, the teacher will assign classwork and homework that's relevant to the material that we're going to be tested on. Testing students on new material is like being on a basketball team and having the coach ask you to run an unfamiliar play during a championship game. In both basketball and in learning, completing a task without practice will often yield a poor result. So pause the slide if you need more time to think and consider what mode of explanation is being used in this example, in this excerpt. The mode of explanation that's being used here is comparing. You'll notice that the student brings in an example of basketball and shows a really good analogy here, like testing students on new material is like being on a basketball team and having the coach ask you to run an unfamiliar play. So I thought that was a really excellent example of comparing. And you can definitely bring in outside examples that don't necessarily have to do with your ideal learning environment, but if you show the reader how these things connect, it can be a very powerful way to expand your essay. So I have the scuba diver here because I'm hoping that it will trigger you to think you want to dive deep when you're writing. You don't want to just give a surface explanation. You really want to go into some detail. And that is not the same as fluff. That will meaningfully expand your essay when you dive deep. So if you properly utilize the modes of explanation, you won't have to resort to fluff or filler, and your essay will be more vivid, persuasive, and unique. In closing, although this may sound cheesy, I want to remind you that you are one of a kind. No two people have had the same experiences or see the world in the exact same way. If your essay sounds like it could have been written by anyone, this is a clue that you need to better integrate the modes of explanation into your writing and show your reader your unique and detailed perspective. Happy writing!